Well, thanks to everybody who's on the call. We're getting a few more participants popping in here and there. So, and we will. That's the way it generally works. And this is the way we roll on OS Virtual Check-in. We wing it, right, as we go, because it's the fun and the joys of today's technology and a live chat session. So. I'll start by talking about what is OS Virtual Check-in for those of you who are new, and a couple of you are new for our session tonight. It's a way for us collaboratively to support the train enthusiast community, which is our purpose at Caboose as an organization. We're on this very same Zoom call platform. There's Einstein. Hey, Einstein. On the very same Zoom call platform through the end of the year on Tuesdays and Thursday evenings from 6:30 to 7:30 Mountain Time. The format, first 30-40 minutes is interview and then Q&A. The way we handle that is because we have all the participants muted, and you can unmute yourself, but if you take your cursor and go down, if you're not familiar with Zoom, take your cursor, go down to the bottom of the screen, there's a bar down there that will pop up, and there's a chat bubble on that. If you have questions at any point during the whole program, type them into the chat, and then once we move to Q&A, Michelle will take your questions in turn. Let's see, a few ground rules. We're here to connect with fellow train enthusiasts, so be respectful, no trolling, and oh, I'm waving at your daughter.
Hi, we just started. Yeah. So you can come back in about 40 minutes. We'll have the trains running. Okay. I know. See, she wants to run trains. So.
Oh, cool. I can't blame her. I
feel like that BBC guy that was being interviewed, and the wife comes in and is like,
right. It was funny. The chicken's burning. So anyway, we're here to connect and to have fun. So be respectful, no trolling, no grandstanding, and no inappropriate comments or questions. And of course, as with any other forum today, let's leave politics out of it. We're recording shows, and we intend to post them to the Caboose YouTube page when processed. Gerald and I were just talking about that today, and I'll get this over there as soon as it's processed this evening. And we're open to suggestions. So that being the do's and don'ts, let's get on with the interview. Tonight's guest been a friend of mine we were just talking about that 20 years, and when we first met back when Stefan was working for LaSalle Bank in Chicago, and I was doing some consulting for LaSalle Bank. He was in our surface transportation group doing railroad deals, and I was one of the outside guys that they had that would do the due diligence on the transactions. So we met way back then. I've known each other since. Stefan is a railroad enthusiast, a modeler, and a professional railroader, all into one, in one overstuffed burrito. So I'd like to introduce Stefan Loeb. He's the EVP and Chief Commercial Officer of the Watco companies. And Stefan, welcome, and thanks for joining us here on OS Virtual Check-in tonight. Thanks for being
awesome.
here.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me. And it's nice to see everybody out there enjoying model railroading in a very unprecedented time. And this is a lot of fun to do. A nice little distraction. So
it is.
It'll be fun to talk trains tonight.
Good time to do that. Yeah. So speaking of which, let's start with my favorite way of starting these programs. All of you who've been on the show before, have watched the chat session before, and that is tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and particularly tell us about your passion for trains.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born and raised in Southern California, West Los Angeles. I was a Christmas baby. I was born 5 days before Christmas, and when my dad found out that he had a boy, after he made sure that my mom was okay and I was healthy, he ran out to Allied Model Trains, the famous West Side LA train store, and bought me an LGB starter set, because every boy has to have a train, and girl for that matter, has to have a train going around the Christmas tree at Christmas. And so he did that, and by my first birthday, when the train was back up again, I was already operating. So my parents just really got into supporting this passion that they kind of created. But where it really took off is we used to go skiing every year up in the Eastern Sierras at a place called June Mountain and a place called Mammoth Lakes. And to get there, you would have to stop and get gas at Mojave, California. Obviously, a big area on the Tehachapi line for both SP. It's where the Santa Fe ties in on the east side of the line. And one day we were getting gas, and a Southern Pacific local was going by with a caboose, and the conductor asked if I could have a ride, and so I did. Good old SP bay window caboose, and I was hooked after that. So, and my parents really supported me. Any books I ever wanted, they were very supportive of that. I built out my LGB layout. And then when I was about 12, maybe 11 or 12, my dad and I started putting 4x8 sheets of plywood together to build a larger HO scale layout, which I started modeling with the Southern Pacific. And anyways, that started it. And then I went to get my degree in finance at Indiana University, came to the Midwest here, and just lucked into that banking opportunity at LaSalle that you were talking about, where I was able to use my passion and my skill, and it's been that way ever since, really.
Awesome. A lot of us talk about being a train enthusiast or enjoying trains for as long as we can remember, but you're the first one I think that I've ever met who has been a train enthusiast since before you can probably remember.
Yeah, that's right.
I think you hold the record for 5 days old. That's pretty amazing. To get your first train.
It's an intense passion. Just ask my wife, right?
Right. Yeah, bless those that have to put up with us.
That's right.
And it's really interesting the way you say this, because we tend to have at younger ages we tend to have dabbled in this dangerously strange drug of being a rail fan and a train enthusiast. But usually, what really hooks us is in many cases a cab ride. In my case, it was a cab ride. In your case, it was a ride in a caboose, or a train ride. A passenger train ride. So that's as we mentioned the other day in our planning call. All these stories are different. Each story is different, and they're all the same, and that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. As we talked about the other day, I really enjoy the fact that we're in an enviable position that quite a few people are in, but not as many as perhaps could be the case, and that is that we're professional railroaders, and also our vocation is our avocation, because we're passionate about railroads and the railroad industry, and we're also model railroaders. So that's kind of all three in one. And as we were talking about the other day, and I want you to address this a bit, if you would, kind of the evolution that I've seen of train enthusiasts as professional railroaders, because as having run a railroad, I was happy to have people who were passionate about trains as engineers and conductors and mechanics and track workers and accountants, and because I figured that just made for a better employee. It wasn't always that way, so maybe you can address that just a little bit.
Yeah, I had a decision early on, I guess. Do you hold it in, or do you express it? I think the key is it's all about balance, just like anything in life, right, Kevin? And so as a junior banker trying to convince, generally older people, to bank with me, I decided to just go for it and show people that I had a passion for it, because they would understand that, okay, I may be young, but I understand their business better than an older banker, so to say. And it worked really well, even on, and I don't want to say anything too controversial, but even like crusty old people like Larry Parsons at the Wheeling in Lake Erie, he liked the fact that I understood where he came from on the Rio Grande and what he had done in his past life and what he was doing at Wheeling. I felt like we were really able to help him at LaSalle Bank. So, once you're kind of out in the industry, you're out. But what I would say in general, not talking about me specifically, is it is a little bit more welcoming now. But again, you cannot be throwing it on your shoulder. You can't, be foaming out the mouth. But what you find is as you move your way up, pretty much everybody, or every railroad, I should say, that I interact with has several folks that are very into it. And it just makes for a very interesting industry. Other than maybe aviation, I can't think of a craft where people are so into the actual, operation and passion for the business like railroading. And so there are a lot of us out there. And as the example I used, for the planning session, I'll use today for everybody else. Again, I hate to say it, but I have to make decisions sometimes to do things that my rail fan self doesn't like, because you have to remember it is a business. And I think where it does still get tricky is when people maybe sometimes forget that. But
Yes.
It's very helpful. I think it's more welcoming now. There aren't the witch hunts for people that I've heard there used to be. And again, to have a passion in an industry is pretty special these days, and we certainly have a lot of them here.
It is. It does seem to make for a better professional railroader. And there's your point about balance is well taken. You really have to know when to draw the line. Although I was just I was explaining last night to my girlfriend what the term that's actually on my business card. On our business cards at Caboose, we have your functional title, and mine is Chief Vision Officer, and we have your level of foaminosity, which mine is Super Foamer, and that came from one of our engineers at Marquette Rail. Dave Grace called me Super Foamer one day, and it stuck. And so I kind of got tagged with that. It's a little easier to be called Super Foamer if you're the CEO than if you're an engineer or or perhaps a train master. Then it might be considered more of a derogatory term. Maybe it was.
Sure.
I don't know. I'm not sure. So talk about the time you spent at Tehachapi when you were in your wonder years.
Yeah, absolutely. So growing up in West LA, there's really no rail action, or there's light rail now, but back then there was nothing. So you had to drive places, and I took a couple trips to Cajon. My dad used to take me to West Colton Tower when I was real young, but early on, I just was drawn to Tehachapi. Anyone who's been there, and for those of you that have not, it is literally one of the most visually stunning rail lines you can go to. And what's amazing about it is how compact it is. I mean, from end to end, there's probably, I should have looked at the rail charts, but in 20 miles, there's probably 50 miles of track. It's a very compact area, good road access, and just a tremendous show. Aside from just the loop, you had places like Caliente, the Horseshoe Curve, you had tunnels, you had helper operations, and all within about an hour and a half drive of where I grew up. So I took many trips up there back in the quote unquote good old days, pre-BNSF merger, UP merger, and just saw the show. And I love the contrast of the big lumbering SP, wood products extras coming out of Oregon, contrasted to the brand new double stack and intermodal hotshots that Santa Fe was running with their pretty silver and red engines. It really struck me. And so when I was looking for modeling ideas, there was just no question what I was going to end up doing.
Yep. And we see an example of it right there, right next to you. So your model railroad, and we talked about this a little bit when we were talking with Lance Minheim a week ago about model railroads being, for many of us, evocative of a feeling. And many times that's a nostalgic feeling or a reflection of something we experienced. Most times, I would argue. And so your model railroad obviously reflects and is evocative of that and some of those memories that you talk about. So, perhaps we could do how do you want to do it? You want to do a walk around, or, how?
We can. The only thing I'm going to try and do is, so I'm going to try and walk around with this guy.
Okay.
The only problem is, let's see. I was wondering if I turn it around. And then the only problem I might have is the audio is going off my computer. So if I stray a little bit, I may have to bring my computer. So I'll wing it.
You know what? Bear with me just a second. Let me figure out how we can. Does everybody see his cam on the phone? Okay, great. Okay, go ahead.
All right, perfect. Okay, sorry, hold on. Now can you still see everything, or do I have a pop-up?
We can see the layout.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. Okay. I'm just getting a thing here. There we go. Okay, so basically, you can see this room is a very narrow room with 2 wide pockets, and I'll get to the other pocket in a second. This is the only part of the basement my wife would give me for railroading. The rest of it is a bar and a TV area. But kind of panning back here, can you still hear me okay?
I can, yes, we can.
So you can see the big scenic highlight of the layout is as close to a replica as you can get fitting in this room of the Tehachapi Loop. Going through the tunnel and then coming over here, the siding at Waylong. Just like the real thing, it's a single track layout, double layer, level, and then on the other side, which we can walk to down in a second, if you want me to go mobile with the computer so you can hear me, is the helix, which brings the 2 levels back together.
Oh, okay.
Is basically how it works. In scale miles, it's just about 4 miles a track of runtime, and again with the trains going slowly because of the mountain grades, it usually takes about 8 minutes or so to do a cycle. I have 2 sidings. I have one on the other side, which we can get to in a moment as I walk down there. And then I've got 2 storage yards coming off the helix. So it's like a double-decker storage. That's how it works.
Nice, nice. So I tell you what.
Here, what I'll do is I'll just hold the computer and walk with you guys. That way you
can. Okay, that works. That works. Then we can have the sound too. That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. So as you see here, this is obviously this part of the layout is trying to be prototypical to look like an actual scene. And actually, before I leave this area, I do want to show you guys before I forget. This is one of my favorite features. So this is a hill that, if you go to the loop, is actually at the loop. Before they closed it off to the public, this is where I would spend most of my time shooting. As you can see, I actually modeled myself in a pink shirt for some reason. I guess
that's awesome.
I was feeling very, stand outish that day. But what's really cool is
how very car, California.
Yeah, Californian, you got it. That's my '94 Ford Probe, which is the exact car I used to drive up to the So, and then what I did is I actually pasted some photos that I took of the different areas, so you can kind of see how we tried to model the different areas. And my favorite part of that, let me put the, sorry for all the moving around, is if you look down the track, basically from where the guy is there, that's basically exactly these pictures right here.
Nice. Awesome.
And so when I have my own tank train going up the hill with the mid-train helpers and all the power up front, I can sit right here, and it basically takes me back to what made me, so excited and happy, and why I got into railroading and enjoy railroading so much to begin with, is that scene.
That's so cool.
Anyway, so let's go down to the other side here.
So Stefan, how deep is that wide part of the room right there?
It's I probably should have looked at the dimensions. I had them all memorized when we were building the layout, but it's about 20 feet from where I'm standing to the back there that you can see.
Okay.
And real quick here, I'll show you. We'll go under. So one of the cool features of this is to get to these utility closets. We have this area, so you can actually go to the other side of the loop here and get another angle.
Oh, nice, nice.
Of everything.
Nice.
That's the part where I used to rail fan.
Yeah, right here. This is where a lot of people sit, is kind of right on the east end of Waylon, right about right here, actually.
Nice.
And then I've got a pop out in the middle of the hill just in case derailments to get to the rest of operation. And you can see again, here's a picture, some bad
from that perspective.
But from that perspective.
Nice.
So coming back over here, again, just using various elements, this tunnel reminded me of an area kind of just east of the cable crossovers. You can see again a train going through that area with the tunnel. It's not focusing, but looks very similar to that. And then coming this way, this is the one part that's not prototypical. So we camping, Chris, really close to where you grew up in Gaviota. And so I had to have at least a little bit of a representation of the SP trestle at Gaviota, which is not prototypical, but hey, modeler's license, right? And so we come over here on the top level is my second sighting I was talking about. So it's fun to operate this railroad is both your sightings are on the top. And so you have a long stretch of single track, including the helix. And so when you're planning meets and having operating sessions, you really have to stay on your toes. I am a runner, as we were talking about in the planning session. I like to just see my trains run. I'm not a big switch guy. I do have a couple of little industries up here in a part of the layout that still needs to be finished. And then continuing on, you can see the helix right here, which gets the trains back to the different levels. And then coming off the helix, basically on both levels here, and then where you see the intermodal train are two lines, and you can see the cars down in the back there that go through the wall and into my double-decker storage yards in the utility closet.
Nice.
But in addition, I still have a lot of other stuff, as you can see. Not always the best organized. And by the way, just for historical reference, here are the LGV trains, some of which are over 40 years old when they were bought the day I was born. So,
oh, nice.
Anyways, there they are. So
nice. That's pretty cool.
So that's generally an overview of the layout. In operating sessions, what I'll do is I'll build trains on the helix and in the storage closet, and then run them out onto the main lines. And it basically can act as an end-to-end layout in an operating session. But if you want, the other thing I'll do is you can generally run about 3 good-sized trains on the layout.
Uh-huh.
So what I'll do is I'll run 3 trains in the same direction and have like 2 manifests and 1 intermodal train. The intermodal train will go faster, and then I play the game of getting the slower trains out of the way without having to delay the operation. So.
Very good. So tell me this: when did you start building this layout, and how long did it take to build it?
Yeah, so I'm one of the folks that I guess you could call a cheater. With the time I have, doing my day job, I never would have been able to do this. So I actually had a company called Engine House Services out of Green Bay, Wisconsin, come down. They spent a lot of time. It's a really cool operation. It's just like a piece of art or anything custom. They spent more time asking me about what I liked. What was what was the inspiration, and then I told them Tehachapi, thinking it would be kind of a likeness of. I never thought they would actually put the Tehachapi loop in the basement. So they designed everything. We tweaked a little bit based on my personal taste, and then they took about once the layout was in the queue, it took about 10 months to build, 9 months to build.
Wow.
And then they brought it down here in sections and delivered it just about, let's see, we're coming up on 3 years now, anniversary. So it didn't have all the scenery to it. I've added a lot of the trees and the bushes and whatnot. And as you could probably see back there, I'm starting to foam in some of the other portions. But yeah, most of it was delivered as is, and it's been running for about 3 years now.
Cool. two of the things come up that while you were doing the tour for us, and pardon me, one of those questions was your bench work height. You know, what is it? What's the variation in your bench work height? Because I know at the very the datum level, the bottom level is still fairly high, and you know where you can view it straight on. So, talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. A couple of things. One, because of the duck under you see, and the other reason is when anyone who's been to the Loop knows how visually stunning it is, and there are so many different layers of the Loop when you're there. Trains just seem to be on all different levels and stages, and I wanted to recreate that in the model room. And so it wouldn't look good in my mind if you were just staring straight down on it. And you know, most of the time you're looking at trains, you're looking up at them. And so this layout's just over 4 feet off the ground, you know, from the bottom. You know, the track height's probably a little bit closer to 4.5 feet on the bottom, and then, you know, just under 6 feet at the top over on the far side is about how high it is. So, you know, again, what that gives you at the Loop here, and you can see on my YouTube video and some of the other things, is where I'm sitting down, I can't see the far side of the Loop, just like the real thing. So I'll see a train, you can hear the train down on the far side, and then you see it come looping around here and then pop out of the tunnel. It's just like the real thing, which is exactly what I was trying to get to.
Nice.
It's a really cool effect. And as you notice, when I was on the other side, you can't see the train running here, but you can hear it. And then suddenly it pops out of the tunnel on the other side and works its way around, again, just like the real thing. So.
Yep, absolutely. Great. And we want to mention the fact that you've mentioned a couple times, we have your Facebook page is Tehachapi Loop in Illinois. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Make sure people check that out because it's a great page. You know, one question I had earlier before you started the layout tour, totally apropos of nothing at all, was when you were working with Larry Parsons at the Wheeling, did you ever see him without a cigar?
It was amazing to me for a guy that had so much pride in his railroad. And as you know, as a guy who owned a railroad, you have a lot of pride. And he was so meticulous about keeping things clean. I mean, he would go through the shop in Brewster and just, you know, really make sure everything was clean, all the tools were clean, everything was put away. And then you'd go high rail with him, and he's just throwing cigars out the window along the right of way. It's like, how does that fit? It was just such a funny story. But yeah, and by the way, folks, we're not talking about like just, I mean, like literally the biggest cigars ever.
Massive cigars.
He'd smoke them all the way down and then just toss them right out. The Wheeling, probably you could fill multiple hopper cars with Larry's cigar butts.
Yeah, right. It's partially ballasted with Cubans.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Nice. Awesome. Michelle, I don't see that we have any questions yet. Okay, that's fine. I know, Michelle, you have some. And I don't want to cut you off. You go ahead.
Myself. There, now can you hear me?
I can, yep.
Okay. Well, honestly, I'm looking at your Facebook page, your Tehachapi Loop in Illinois, and I love the Southern Pacific that I'm seeing on here, and the Santavian Lake. I like how you had all that together. So tell me again what your year range is for your layout. Good
point. Yeah, I forgot to start with that. So I model basically 1985 to 1995. And why that is 85 is when I really started getting into trains and can remember what was out there. And then 95 is just to keep all the big mergers out of it. So no yellow, no green and orange on this layout. All pure Santa Fe and Southern Pacific here. So that's really the reason why.
Yeah, that's a good reason.
Yeah, I think so.
I like that. So, yeah. I had a question about your operating style too, because I'm only used to operating with a dispatcher because that's what we do at the museum.
Yep.
And so when you operate, how do they know where they go? Are you like card system, or what do you do?
Yeah, so as you saw, it's a pretty simple layout design. And so when I do an operating session, I run point to point, basically out of the staging yards you saw or off the helix, depending on which directions. But I'll explain to everybody who comes over what a westbound is, what an eastbound is, and then all the signals work here generally. I'm not the best programmer in the world, I'll be honest, but for the most part, everybody runs on signal indication, and it's kind of whoever gets to the the first sighting first generally takes the sighting or can hold the main, but has to stop waiting for the next train. And I do generally have a person that'll, if it's not me built, because I'm usually busy building the trains, that'll tell each person verbally kind of who's going to take the sighting or not. Generally, even though it doesn't work all that way on Tehachapi, the uphill trains try and not stop for obvious reasons, but it doesn't always work that way, just like in the real thing.
Okay.
I like your characterization as of yourself as a runner, because we have all types of modelers, particularly people who are operators, people who are runners. I see we have Paul on this show, right? Because we mentioned you the other day in our planning call, because I was talking to Stefan about the Grand Road and the fact that your layout is made for running and for enjoying seeing trains run, and there are others that have layouts that are very, very switching intensive, and some, like we talked about with Lance a couple weeks ago, are more like, and I think Gerald, your layout falls into this category, more like something you'd almost see in a museum because they're so amazingly detailed in their work of art, and I guess the point is there's room for anybody, and whatever anybody likes, there's room in their pursuit of this crazy obsession with railroads and with trains, because and as we say at Caboose, generally it's whose layout is it? What do you want to do? Do what you want to do what makes you happy, because that's what this is about. If you really get into much, in fact I'd be interested in your feedback on this, because I know that you have occasionally, and of course no names will be named, but you have occasionally professional railroaders that are there for an op session, and it seems to me that your style of operating really appeals to me. Your style of train movement, right? I'm not, and although the railroad I'm modeling operated on timetable and train order, I'm not really excited about being a stickler about timetable and train order operation. There's sequence trains the way they are on the timetable, and but not just get crazy about and then have people calling each other on the carpet if you have a cornfield meet somewhere. So it seems to me that perhaps people who do this as a profession probably get their fill of that type of thing on the job, and when it comes to here, they want to just enjoy watching the trains run, and they want to do it in the way where they don't have cornfield meets. So maybe you can address that. I don't know.
Yeah, so a couple of things that come to mind on that. The first is, I'm in the short line space. Watco owns 40 plus short line railroads, and as you know, having operated one, it's an intense first mile, last mile. Every single day, I'm dealing with getting cars, into position to be switched into the customer. Are they loaded? Are they unloaded? Are they ready to go? Get them out to interchange. Do the class 1 interchange? Do they not? What's pecan? What's demurrage? And I'm not, I sound like I'm poo-pooing all of that. It's very important. I love that part of the job. But when I go to the railroad, I don't want to pecan anything. Let's just run the cars, right? And again, we usually run with maybe at most 2 locomotives on most of our jobs. I want to see like the 5 engines up front, 4 engine mid trains, like I run here, just blasting up the hill. And so like that's what's really fun. So that's what my cathartic way that I use this layout is, after a busy day of arguing about switching, I can go just watch the cars run. And it's a good feeling. But to your point, it reminds me of one of my funniest stories. The first operating session we had, again, I try and run the real trains that would have showed up on the layout in 85 to 95. And at the time, the hottest train on the Santa Fe was what they called the 199 and the 991 trains. Those are the Chicago, San Francisco or North Bay, and then North Bay Chicago trains. They had UPS. They were guaranteed time, so UPS didn't pay. if they were late. Now, the other folks had to pay, but they had a special deal with UP. Still to this day, even though they have alpha symbols, the 991 and the 199 still runs. And of course, I'm nervous. It's my first operating session. It's about 3 hours in, a couple of beers each for everybody, but everything's going great. The trains are running, there are no derailments. And then we send the local out, my one local with my one customer over here, and it messes up everything. And they can't get out of the way. The 991 gets stabbed at a red signal. And because, like you said, most of the people that come over to run the layout are professional railroaders, everyone's losing their mind. People are screaming. People that haven't been superintendents in years are putting their superintendent's hat on and chewing out the engineers. The engineers are screaming back. But we're laughing too. It was so much fun. So long story short, the word gets out that the layout went well, except for the SP local stabbing the Santa Fe's hottest train. And I'm not going to name names, but a former CEO actually completely dressed me down in an email that looked real for my inability as the train master to operate the trains in a safe and timely manner. So I actually got chewed out by a real railroader for the railroad. And again, when you think of realism, that's about as real as it gets. And I will always have that email saved as a real memento of this layout.
Well, I mean, given that a lot of your railroad career was, thankfully, I'm sure, past the era when the morning call was prevalent,
Yeah.
I'm sure they just figured they had to give you a taste of that,
Oh, I felt like I was back in 1972 or something.
Probably the dumbest practice of any business anywhere is to micromanage a railroad every single morning, and they did it 7 days a week. It was ridiculous. It was all ridiculous. Thankfully, we're past that point, and hopefully in the railroad business. Chris, did you have a question for Stefan?
Yeah. Hey, Stefan, I was just wondering what you were using for your signaling system.
It basically ties into Digitrax. So it's the everything on the layout is Digitrax. So it's not one of the really fancy systems. I'll probably need to look into that because it has its limitations. Like I was saying, it doesn't ever give a false indication for the train running, but like I don't have enough of the if-thens figured out. So it'll a signal will turn green when I still have a train running through it and stuff like that when you have 3 trains out there. So just standard Digitrax that at some point I probably need to do some research on and up the game a little bit because I see there's stuff out there that is really impressive and I need to look at it at some point.
One more question for you about your signals. What are you using for your actual signals? Did you scratch build those, or did you find one on that?
Those, so they're all, I think it's, what is it, NJ International, is that right?
Oh, okay.
They were all kits because they were SP specific cantilevers, as you can see in those USS and S, targets, just like the real railroad. I specified that for the builder to put in. That was one of the things I said. I go, I need real looking line side signals because as you've been up there, you know how distinctive they are up on the hill, or were, I guess. They're all gone. So they were all, that was part of the delivery that they did, was putting in all the signal systems too as part of the layout.
Yeah, it's funny that, some of those line side things just make a layout SP because it's not just the power. SP was also weird about like some of the other stuff around the right of way too.
The only thing, because they were all gone by the time I was up there, but those old train indicators they had that almost looked like little semaphores, but they were on a target. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so all sorts of stuff. But yeah, the one thing I remember is just those cantilever signals. And actually, Santa Fe had them. It seemed like the Western roads were big into that one design, but I told them, I said, I have to have at least a couple of the cantilever signals. So they built those for me as part of my ask.
Nice. What other questions do we have? If anybody, if you have a question, you're welcome to either way. You're welcome to either type it in the chat bubble or just unmute yourself you can take your cursor, go down to the bottom left, and just click that mute, and that will unmute you. We just ask that you mute yourself back after you ask your question. So, and while we're doing that, I'll ask Nicholas, did you have a question?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Hey,
Hey,
Stefan.
Nick,
How's it going?
do you still have your Orioles jersey on?
I do.
Yeah, there it is.
So tonight would have been the first game of the home opener against the Cardinals.
Nice.
What is your typical motive power consist on a one of your layout run sessions? I know that you've got that range 85 to 95. Do you tend to try and go towards the early end of that spectrum, or do you like the later side, or you just mix it up?
I mix it up because I think it's fun to do both. And, I've been doing these Facebook Lives every Sunday. And what I like about it is the fact that, you can have, why I do 85 and to get super foamery here is, the SP was famous for, you want to talk about like how EMD probably got to charge them all sorts of extra, and it probably gives Chris headaches at Athern, like all the L windows and the emergency red lights and the oscillating headlights, the SP had all of it. And I love being able to have some of those. Although most of those were starting to get phased out by my period, but it still allows me to have them. But the period I really do remember is kind of I'll call it the Rio Grande era, 88 on, which, had speed lettering and Rio Grande run through power. So, it's a model. I never saw a GP40X on Tehachapi, but I have all 4 of them because I thought GP40Xs were really cool. So I take a little bit of license, but pretty much everything that could run in that decade I have, and I don't go one way or the other. Although it is fun to tie up a lot of war bonnets together. So again, that's more of the end for the Santa Fe side. But other than the Santa Fe, I think I do the whole 10 years pretty good justice.
I've heard stories where here in St. Louis, they were running a lot of SP power together because of reliability issues. So if you wanted to run your entire SP fleet, I'm sure you could do that for this era.
What's funny is I didn't have I'm going to use the wrong term, but I didn't have a repeater on this side of the layout over here by the loop. And my tank train or my export coal train or Trona coal train would run by, and I'd have 11 engines on it, and I'd have 10 engines on the tank train, and it would just overrun the Digitrack system until I put the additional router essentially or booster into the layout because I was running so much power. But I love that. That's cool. As you can see, I have almost as many locomotives as freight cars. It's just my thing, I guess.
It's a fun thing to have.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's okay. What's a typical length of one of your trains?
Typically, my manifest trains, I try and keep kind of 18 to 22, 25 cars, because by the time you put the consist we were just talking about on them, the sighting length becomes an issue. The way long sighting here can fit, call it 8 engines and probably 25-ish cars. 28 cars, I think, is the longest train I run, is the tank train. So not quite prototypical, but they look big enough. I mean, when they're out on the layout, they look fine. But then if you do that, you kind of can't do the meat over on the other side. You can, it just, gets clunky. So most of my trains probably are around 18 cars with 3 or 4 locomotives is typically, if I want to pass, is what I'll run. But if they're all running in the same direction, I can get, 20 to 25 cars easy, if not more.
Right. Right.
So.
To what extent do you find that, we had a little bit of talk around this in both particularly 2 weeks or a week ago when we were on again with Lance, we talked about the fact that sometimes you can, we have a tendency to focus on cars and locomotives a lot, because that's what we're generally looking at trackside, right?
Yep.
And sometimes we forget that there are a lot of other parts to a railroad that kind of frame those cars and locomotives. That I think Lance made the point that you can have the most exquisitely detailed locomotive or freight car, but then if it's on big clunky basically train set track, that can detract from that. And it seems to me that that's heightened when you're a professional railroader and you spend a lot of your time out on the railroad.
Mhm.
You start picking up things that you want to emulate in the basement. And with you, you wouldn't have to be a professional railroader because you spent so much time at Tehachapi. You already had in your mind's eye what you wanted to recreate.
Yeah.
But to what extent do you think that's the case? That as a professional railroader, and you're out on the property, you see all kinds of different things. You say, you know what, I'd like to replicate that, and that's something I hadn't thought about before. Or track as a model too, things like that.
Yeah, it's in a way, this layout I think doesn't have a ton of opportunity for that because it is the main line out in the middle of nowhere. I think where you see a lot of that is like grade crossings or maybe like an interlocking plant or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
This again, just kind of being out in the middle of nowhere. The big thing for me, and I was talking to Chris about it earlier, were the signals. Like to me, that's really what stood out. So making sure I had the prototypical signals. The big thing for me, it's not really part of the railroad, but the trees were important because, again, the layout kind of showed up just without any sort of ground cover whatsoever. And so for me, I really had to look at those photos that I had to remind myself, because I haven't been to Tehachapi, believe it or not, in probably 20 years, if not longer. And so getting the trees right and making sure they didn't have too many leaves on them, because as you can see in the photos, the trees have leaves. They're just kind of sporadic. It's high desert country up there for the most part. So just trying to get that look right, so I could sit here every time I go in and get transported to that place. But again, like seeing the signals to me are kind of the big pushes. Seeing how the tunnel portals look, stuff like that. But there's not a ton of other wayside, I guess.
Well, but maybe not, because you mentioned earlier, like the trackside train indicators.
Yeah.
Signals for the for the track crews, right?
Yep.
Which is basically for speeders, right?
Yep.
For track speeders, so they could know whether there's a train in the next block. Even small details like that are unique to a railroad like
Yep.
yours. The railroad I modeled, the Monon, had these strange, a lot of things that only the Monon had, but their cross bucks were unique to
Yep.
the Monon.
Yep.
They had the Monon's logo on them. They had a green light signal at some rural crossings that if the green light was out, then to expect a train. But they didn't have full flashers. So there's little things like that I think you can add that really say SP or Santa Fe, and like you say, like the signals do, but there are even smaller details, even tool sheds or speeder sheds, things like that, right?
Yep.
That you kind of reminded of if you see them all the time, or maybe not. Maybe if you see them all the time, you take them for granted and don't think about them necessarily, right?
Yeah. But it's a canvas. I mean, I can't wait to get over to the industry and put derails on and just put more detail around the customers and where the spotting docks are and all that stuff that I haven't had time to do yet. Those are those types of details that'll be fun.
Well, there's also stuff around Tehachapi too, because since it was sort of like a high density, I should say a high risk area for fires, there were like water cars, water tanks, and things like that. Yeah.
The one thing that I think need to model at some point, anyone who's been there has seen them, are the greasers, the mainline greasers that they have. That's another thing that, that were all over the place. I assume they still are, but there were a lot of greasers up there.
For curves, which would require a particular type of weathering for 50 to 100 feet, at least 50 to 100 feet in either direction. From where the wheel depresses that greaser and squirts grease on the gauge side of the rail. So absolutely, yeah. That's interesting. But again, either one of you guys could have had that from just hanging around Tehachapi as much as you did, as we all did. For those of us who were rail fans from the time that we were modelers, or maybe before the time we were modelers. Nice.
So
What questions we have? Go ahead.
I have one. Can you not visit it today? Is there like no legal way to railfan the Tehachapi Loop today?
No, you can see it at the main overlook, I guess, but the access road up to the loop, my understanding, again, I've not been there in a while, is it's now pretty much off limits. Like the hill that I showed you right over here, like you can't get to. I believe. I'll ask any other experts out there. But
Was that
that's what
restricted after the fire?
I think it's actually, the loop is actually a private ranch, which just fascinated me back in the day. And I think the ranchers just got sick of everybody walking all over the place, leaving gates open, letting cattle out, and they just kicked everybody out.
Yeah.
Liabilities.
A reminder that we always have to be considerate when we're out rail fanning, and leave only footprints, take only pictures.
That's right, exactly.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Well,
Right.
I've seen the Tehachapi Loop at the San Diego Model Railroad Museum.
Yes.
The La Mesa Club, and it was really nice. It seems to be more of a spring, where your layout doesn't seem to be as green. So you've chosen like somewhere around the green summertime.
Yeah, the joke growing up in Southern California is the hills are green for like a week in the spring, and then everything dies. So, and then unfortunately, then it all seems to burn now these days, which is really sad. But I don't remember ever being on the hill when it was green. Even in December in rainstorms, it's really those February, March rain showers that'll maybe get some green out on there, but again, by June, May, it's back to this brown. So that's how I remember it. So that's how I chose it. But you mentioned La Mesa. I mean, that's such an inspiration too. When I was getting ready for this layout, because I knew it was coming. It's like an expectant father. It's getting baked over here, and it's going to come, and here it is. I would watch La Mesa, and it's like, wow, they're running like full 76 car. GATX tank trains. Like I was just happy to get 28 cars to go around without derailing. It's an impressive place, and I need to get back there to basically see what a full scale version of this looks like. But for my limitations, in this narrow room, I'll take what I have. So
You've done quite a bit in the space that you have, and it's awesome. It's awesome. It's really something to see and something to behold.
I agree. I like it.
Yeah, it's great. Well, if we have no more questions, anybody else have anything? Well, I appreciate, first of all, Stefan, and first of all, by the way, I totally skipped over one of my bullet points at the beginning, and I failed to introduce my co-host, Michelle of the Colorado Model Railroad Museum, and Chris Palmares. I'm so sorry that I didn't introduce you guys at the beginning. My bad, I'll tell you what, since I made that horrible transgression, one of you can handle the next show. Oh, wait. That's not necessarily be a benefit, right?
I'm just a question asker.
Love when you're asking questions, both of you. Thank you so much for that. I want to first of all, Stefan, thank you for participating today. Great to reconnect after a few years, and thank you everybody who's participated on this call. Again, we do this every Tuesday night and every Thursday night, 6:30 to 7:30 Mountain Daylight Time, and we'll be doing that through the end of the year on this very same Zoom link. And on Saturdays from 5 till 6, right? Yeah, 5 to 6 Mountain Time. We crack open a cold one, and we have the OS Happy Hour on a different channel, but that's also available on. A link to that is also on the Caboose Facebook page, and we have more of a free-form discussion about what's on everybody's bench, and what you're interested in, and Chris may decide to pull up a virtual railfan site, and we might watch trains for a while. So avail yourself of that too. So thank you for participating today. Keep an eye on keep an eye on our Facebook pages for the next week's topic and guests. I was distracted briefly because there's a name in the rail fan community, the rail photography community particularly, and also a modeler who I'm talking to about next Tuesday, and also talking to another person who's an author of one of the first books that I got. I guess I was about 13 years old. That stoked my my appetite for trains, and a longtime rail fan. So we'll have more and more people on here to talk about model railroading, real railroading, and rail fanning. So thank you for that. Let's see, we've got we touched base about 5 o'clock Saturday evening. Yeah, that's it. The next one will be the OS Happy Hour Saturday night at 5 Mountain. So we hope to see you then. Thanks for checking in with us tonight.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you, Steph.
Take care, guys. Bye.
Good to see you. Bye-bye.